Welcome to my recap of Arcane Season 1. Use the chapter markers for a specific episode, or sit back, grab some shimmer, and enjoy the recap. Vi leads her younger sister Powder through the smoky remains of a battle. They spot Vander, a large man armed with cast iron gloves, brutalizing an enforcer, and they spot their parents' remains. Vander looks at the weeping children and drops his gloves. Instead, he picks the two girls up and brings them back home to the undercity of Zaun. As they leave, Vi takes one more look at the utopia of Piltover and its instrument of oppression, the Enforcers, the city's guard who murdered her parents. Years later, Vi leads Powder and their friends Milo and Clagger into Piltover. They dangerously travel across rooftops to avoid the Enforcers patrolling below. Powder is scared, but at Vi's encouragement, she follows. They reach their destination, a penthouse filled with scientific artifacts and other valuables. They quickly fill their bags with anything worth stealing. In the back room, Powder finds a chest filled with small, glowing crystals. When someone arrives at the front door, they run. Powder fills her bag with the orbs, but in her haste, drops one. The impact causes the crystal to explode, badly damaging the building and drawing the attention of enforcers. The children escape through a sewage pipe, but as they make their way back to Zaun, they bump into Deckard and his small gang, who decide to help themselves to the stolen goods. Vi, Milo, and Clagger fight them off while Powder runs for safety. One of the goons chases her. Cornered, she unleashes one of her homemade weapons, but it fails. With no options left, she throws their loot into the river and runs off. As they return to Zaun, Milo is frustrated at Powder for losing their haul. He complains that every time she comes along, something goes wrong. She jinxes every job. Back in Zaun, they head to Vander's bar, where he serves drinks and serves as leader to the underground city, or the lanes. In the back room, he chastises Vi for the botched job. "Did you ever stop to think about what could have happened to you?" he asks, then gestures to her sister and friends. To them? Then he asks where they even got the tip for this job, and Powder admits it came from Little Man at Benzo's shop. Vi complains that it's unfair they have to live in the shadow of Piltover. They should be up there fighting their oppressors. Vander clears the room and lectures Vi. They look up to her and follow her. Whatever happens to them is on her. Just like it's on me what happens to us down here, he adds. We make ourselves a problem for Piltover, and they will send the enforcers. Then, Vander visits Benzo's shop, where Vi got their tip about the penthouse. Outside, Clagger asks Little Man, or Echo, how he found the penthouse they robbed. He explains that a wealthy topsider came into the shop to buy some supplies, so Echo followed the man home. When enforcers arrive, Clagger runs, but Echo spies as the enforcers meet with Vander. The younger enforcer, Marcus, demands the culprits of the recent explosion in Piltover, but the older enforcer, Grayson, suggests he take a walk. Then she and Vander speak plainly. She tells Vander that the home which was attacked belonged to an important family. The council will need someone to make an example of. People need to feel safe. Vander scoffs. Yeah, topside people. We had a deal, Vander, Grayson says. You keep your people off my streets, and I stay out of your business. Echo is shocked to see Vander working with the enforcers. Grayson continues, explaining that if he gives her a name, the culprit will be dealt with quietly. No one will know he gave them up. But if she leaves empty-handed, she will return with an army of enforcers. I'm sorry, Grayson, Vander says, but I can't offer up my own people. If you change your mind, this will reach me. She hands him a small device and leaves. In their bedroom, Vi finds Powder sulking at how worthless she feels in comparison to the rest of them. But Vi makes her feel better by taking her somewhere high up for a visual tour of their gang's past follies. For example, she points out the gutter where Clagger once got his foot stuck running from enforcers. We've all had bad days, Vi says, but we learn, and we stick together. Before returning home, Powder reveals that she managed to hold on to some of those glowing crystals from the apartment, though neither are sure what they really are. In any case, they agree to keep them under wraps for now. Meanwhile, Deckard is interrogated by the man who ordered him to follow the children. His superior, a badly scarred man, is pleasantly surprised to hear the children are the ones who caused the explosion, meaning their adoptive father Vander is in trouble. He informs his other men that their timelines moved up and asks to see their latest experiment. They feed strange purple fluid to a mouse, and the small creature rapidly mutates. With its increased size and strength, the mouse easily slaughters and consumes a cat. Then, the scarred man decides it's time to test the fluid on a human, and Deckard will be their first subject. Hours earlier, during Vi's burglary, Jayce, the man who bought supplies from Benzo's shop, returns home to his penthouse. He tries to enter, but finds the door blocked, then gets knocked unconscious by the crystal's explosion. He dreams of an earlier time, when he and his mother were trapped in a snowstorm. She nearly dies from the cold, until a mysterious figure arrives with a staff. The man uses magic to clear the storm, rescuing the young Jayce and his mother. Before leaving, the mysterious savior leaves Jayce with a small crystal, a remnant of the life-saving spell. In the present, Jayce is interrogated by Grayson. During the Enforcer's investigation into the explosion, they discovered many restricted items in his home. He's also questioned by Viktor, assistant to the dean of the academy. "He sent me here to ensure that anything dangerous is removed safely," Viktor says. Jayce is arrested. In the holding cell, he meets with Professor Heimerdinger, who asks what sort of research Jayce was conducting. When he learns Jayce was trying to harness magic through science, he quickly tries to set the boy straight. "The Arcane is dangerous, Jayce," the professor says. "A force of nature. Science cannot control it." At 307 years old, the professor has been around long enough to know there are certain mysteries of science best left unsolved. This is one of them. He advises Jayce to admit his mistake to the council, speak nothing of magic, and he may get off with just a slap on the wrist. Elsewhere, Jayce's patrons, the Kiraman family, debate whether or not to speak up for him. Their daughter and Jayce's friend Caitlin insist they must. The explosion wasn't his fault, and her mother agrees. Later, Jayce Tallis stands before the council, accused of illegal experimentation and endangering the citizens of Piltover. He at first admits wrongdoing, but his frustration grows at the onslaught of accusation, and he finally cracks, shouting the truth. "I was trying to create magic." Most are appalled or skeptical, but Viktor looks intrigued. The council insists that Arcane is only available to those born with the talent. It can't be fabricated, but Jayce insists they're wrong. Science can harness the Arcane, and it can be used for good. He saw that when he was a child. "This is the city of progress," Jayce says. "Think of the wonders we could create." But Heimerdinger disagrees. "Enough!" he shouts, and tells them of an earlier time only he is old enough to have lived through. He's seen the way this sort of power corrupts, consumes, and lays waste to civilizations. Then Jayce's mother appears. She tells them that her boy was foolish and unwise, but begs their forgiveness. The council votes, and Jayce is banished from the academy. At home, he scoffs at his mother. Magic saved her life, and if his own family won't help him, he'll find someone who will. He visits the Kiraman family's home, his patrons, but their daughter and his friend Caitlin tells him that her parents won't see him. His name is no good anymore. Meanwhile, Marcus leads a group of enforcers into the underground. When they spot Vi and her crew, the children run. With Echo's help, they escape. After the enforcers' meddling, the underground citizens are split on how to respond. Vander wants to keep the peace and insists they wait for the topsiders' fervor to blow over. Others, led by Sevica, want to strike back. Vi is frustrated with her adoptive father's inaction and wonders why they don't fight back. She notices Echo knows something, and at her behest, he spills it. Vander has a deal with the enforcers. And Vander isn't the only one striking deals with topsiders. Elsewhere in the lanes, the scarred man invites Marcus for a meeting, promising to help him find the 4 children who have been evading the enforcers. Later, the man tells Deckard about real power. It doesn't come to those who are born strongest, fastest, or smartest. No, it comes to those who will do anything to achieve it. Then, Deckard nervously drinks the strange purple science experiment. He screams in pain as his eyes glow and bright purple veins cover his body. At Vander's bar, the last drop, Marcus arrives with some enforcers, after being tipped off by the scarred man. Vander warns Vi, and the children hide. After the enforcers leave, Vi demands that they need to fight back. They might not be lucky enough to keep escaping like this. So, Vander tries to talk sense into her. He takes her to the bridge where her parents died. The bridge where he led the attack, which drew the enforcers' ire, and got her parents killed. "Nobody wins in war, Vi," he tells her. She asks him what they're going to do. The enforcers will come back. Vander doesn't know, but he assures that he will figure it out. Topside, Jayce stands at the edge of his destroyed penthouse and prepares to leap from it. "Am I interrupting?" Viktor asks. He tells Jayce that he was intrigued by his research into magic, and tells him that he knows what it feels like for no one to believe in you. Viktor himself was a cripple from the Undercity. But he believed in himself, and now he believes in Jayce. He offers to help complete his research. Underground, Vi tells Powder to always remember that what makes you different makes you stronger. Then Grayson receives a small device, the one she left with Vander in case he was ready to give someone up for the explosion at the penthouse. But it wasn't him who sent it. Worried the enforcers would never give up and might take Powder, Vi offers herself up as the sole scapegoat. Elsewhere, the scarred man remembers when he nearly drowned. He recalls the rage, every nerve lit with madness to fight. He thinks of the man who tried to drown him, the man who scarred him, and thanks his would-be killer for instilling in him the unwavering commitment to fight and survive. Topside, Viktor helps Jayce steal his equipment back from the Council, who confiscated it. But they're caught by Counselor Mel Medarda. They beg her to cover for them. They can prove the technology works, and she agrees to give them a chance. With the required equipment, Viktor and Jayce experiment on the crystals. As the reaction grows, Jayce remembers his and his mother's savior. Then they stabilize the reaction. Heimerdinger is impressed, but still concerned. Mel, on the other hand, is pleased. "Perhaps it's time," she says, "for the era of magic." Hextech, Jayce corrects her, for the era of Hextech, the name for this combination of magic and science. Meanwhile, the enforcers come for Vi, but Vander gets to her first. He says his goodbyes and forces her to stay behind, while he takes her place. As the enforcers take him away, they're attacked by the mutated Deckard, and Grayson is killed. Then the scarred man shows himself. "Silco?" Benzo asks, before the monster attacks him too. "No!" Vander shouts, as his friend is killed. "What the hell have you done?" Marcus shouts. "This wasn't the deal." Vi watches as Silco and the monster drag her father away. At his hideout, Silco tells his old friend Vander about his plan to create monsters to fight Piltover. Then he reminds Vander of the dream they once shared for a united underground, and he reminds Vander of his betrayal. Vander is the one who tried to drown Silco. "I hated you for what you'd done," Silco says. "But as time passed, so did my hate, and I was left with an understanding. The only way to defeat a superior enemy is to stop at nothing, to become what they fear." He adds, "I hated you, but you kept my respect, until you made peace with them, played lapdog after everything we suffered." Then Silco shows him the purple liquid, which he calls Shimmer. Vi returns to Powder, Milo, and Clagger. She recruits them to go after Vander, but tells Powder to stay behind. When she insists on joining, Vi exclaims, "You're not ready!" Powder is crestfallen, but Vi explains, "You're all I have left. I can't lose you." She tells Powder to run if they come after her, and hands her a flare. "Wherever you are, light it up, and I'll find you. I promise." After her older sister leaves, Powder sobs violently, dropping her bag of crystals. They shake and spark. Powder thinks of the explosion at the penthouse and realizes the crystal's power. "I can help them," she says. Meanwhile, Vi, Milo, and Clagger reach Silco's hideout and sneak inside to find Vander, but they are quickly spotted by Silco and his men. So Milo works on freeing Vander, Claggor searches for another exit, and Vi dons her father's ironclad gloves. She holds her own in the fight against Silco's men, until the mutated Deckard appears. Outside, Powder arrives, and seeing her sister in trouble, prepares a new weapon, this one filled with several of the dangerous crystals. Inside, Claggor breaks through the wall to create an escape route. Milo frees Vander, and Powder's device activates. The explosion is violent. Vi and Vander survive it, but Claggor and Milo do not. Deckard tries to finish the job, but Vander proves that he still remembers how to fight. However, the shimmer-powered Deckard proves too powerful. He overpowers Vander, and Silco stabs him. Pinned down by debris, Vi helplessly watches her father fall from the bridge. He lands on the containers of shimmer, and before his body gives out, he consumes some of the purple fluid. Before Deckard can get to Vi, a mutated Vander kills him. Before the building collapses, he grabs his daughter and leaps out of it. He takes the brunt of the landing, saving her and killing him. But not before he manages a few last words. "Take care of Powder." Powder finds Vi and excitedly tells her that it worked. "My monkey bomb finally worked," she shouts. "You did this?" Vi asks. "Why? Why did you do this?" "I only wanted to help," Powder says over and over, sobbing as she sees Claggor's bloody goggles. "I told you to stay away," Vi shouts, and strikes her sister. She tells Powder that Milo was right. She is a jinx. Vi walks away from her sobbing sister. Then she spots Silco approaching Powder and tries to return, but Marcus stops her. He knocks Vi unconscious and warns, "He'll kill you if he hears you," then drags her away. Silco kneels before Powder. "Hello, little girl," he says. "Where's your sister?" She embraces him and answers, "She left me. She is not my sister anymore." "It's okay," he promises. "We'll show them. We will show them all." Years pass. Heimerdinger visits Jayce as Progress Day and Piltover's bicentennial approach, and tells him that rather than Heimerdinger, the council wants Jayce to give this year's speech. Jayce doesn't want to take his place, but Heimerdinger assures him that he's earned it with his breakthroughs in hex tech, especially the hex gates, which allow for ships to teleport. Those gates have brought scholars from distant lands and reignited passions in arts and sciences. Later, Jayce visits his childhood friend Caitlin, who now works as an enforcer, though her wealthy parents have pulled strings to keep her sheltered from any real danger. Elsewhere, Sevika bribes enforcers to let her bring barrels of shimmer through their port. But the transaction is interrupted by the arrival of a gang known as the Firelights. Using their hoverboards, they overpower Sevika and the others, then prepare to burn the shimmer, until they're thwarted by a blue-haired girl who wields small mechanical explosives and 2 pistols. She unmasks one of the Firelights and finds a girl with pink hair. The sight reminds a now-grown Powder of her sister, and she freezes up. The pink-haired girl's flare falls and sets the shimmer aflame. Then Powder snaps into a mad rage. She shoots the pink-haired girl, then fires her machine gun indiscriminately, hitting some of her own team. Later, Caitlin investigates the crime scene. She finds graffiti reminiscent of a children's drawing and a man wounded by Powder's machine gun. Marcus, now the sheriff, finds Caitlin and tells her to get back to guarding her mother's tent. This investigation is none of her business. She points out there's more going on here than just smuggling, but he won't listen to her. Sevika returns to Silco and tells him that the girl is crazy. She lost it and fired on her own people. But Silco blames her for letting things get out of hand, and she storms out. Then Powder drops down from the ceiling where she's been listening. Silco calls her by her current name, Jinx. She tells him what happened. She saw a girl with pink hair, and it reminded her of her sister. Returning to their lab, Jayce and Viktor show Heimerdinger their latest innovation, a stabilized form of the Hextech crystals, Hextech gemstones, safe enough to bring magic to the common man. Then they show off some of the portable devices it could power, a powerful glove, and a mechanical claw with a built-in laser. Heimerdinger is impressed, but thinks they still need another decade or so to ensure it's entirely safe. Viktor is disappointed, eager to release the technology. Jayce meets with Mel and tells her what happened. She puts her hand on his chest and assures him that Heimerdinger is stuck in the past. The city needs someone like Jayce to lead them into the future. He's surprised to hear she's gotten investors interested in hex tech, and she tells him that he should reveal the technology at today's speech. In her quarters, Jinx wallows in madness, speaking to visions of her dead friends, assuring herself that the girl she saw was not her sister. She tells herself that she is not weak, and she's going to prove it to Silco. At the Progress Day celebration, the crowd awaits remarks from Jayce Tallis, Piltover's man of progress, and he gives his speech, full of promises, but to Viktor and Mel's disappointment, no reveal of the recent breakthroughs. Afterward, Caitlin spots a fire and hears a girl calling for help. Enforcers run into the burning building to put it out, but outside, Caitlin spots familiar graffiti. She realizes it's a trap and calls for them to get out, but it's too late. Inside, the enforcers find mechanical devices playing a recording of the girl's pleading. The devices explode, and Jinx happily walks off, proud of her work. Later, Viktor and Jayce report to Heimerdinger that their gemstones and research papers were stolen. Unbeknownst to them, Jinx was the one who stole them, using the explosion as a distraction. The council meets, with hex tech now entering the fold as a weapon in the war between Piltover and the Undercity. Mel suggests that Jayce, hex tech's pioneer, be added to the council, and after a vote, he is added. Underground, Silco is furious with Jinx for her unauthorized attack on the enforcers, until he sees what was gained. She was able to steal a gemstone. Above ground, Jayce visits Caitlin and finds her studying the recent attacks, trying to find who is behind them and the drawings she's found at each. He tells her the news that he's now on the council and asks if she'd join his staff as security. But she has no interest in a ceremonial position that'll keep her behind a desk. Instead, she wants to solve this case. So she visits Stillwater Prison to speak with one of the survivors of the botched smuggling operation. But he isn't available to talk after another prisoner attacked him. So instead, she meets with his attacker, Vi. Vi refuses to answer any questions, accusing Caitlin of working for Silco. Caitlin shows her a picture of the graffiti, and that gets Vi's attention. "Where did you get this?" she asks. "My questions first," Caitlin insists. When Vi implies that the smugglers were working for Silco, Caitlin asks for proof. Vi says she can get it to her, but not from inside the prison. She'd have to be let out. Although reluctant, Caitlin forges orders from her friend, Counselor Jayce Tallis, and has Vi freed. In Piltover, Marcus gives a speech in honor of the enforcers killed in the recent attack and visits Grayson's grave. Then he meets with the man pulling his strings, Silco. Marcus demands answers about the attack, but Silco lies, claiming the attack was done by the Firelights, the same group who ambushed the shipment at the Hex Gates. Meanwhile, Jayce tells Viktor about inconsistencies he's noticed in Hexgate records, indicative of corruption and smuggling, but Viktor is uninterested and instead voices his frustration that Jayce didn't announce their breakthroughs in his speech. People need their technology. They need their help. Now. Jayce begins to apologize, but then Marcus arrives. Jayce points out the suspicious transactions and demands the sheriff investigate to seize any unauthorized merchandise. "This corruption runs deep, Sheriff," Jayce says. "I intend to root it out." Jayce is of course unaware that the sheriff, Marcus, is part of that corruption and works for Silco. Then Jayce asks about the stolen gemstone, and the sheriff repeats Silco's lie. They suspect the Firelights. As they continue their tense conversation, Viktor quietly coughs up blood behind them. And underground, Jinx studies the gemstone, while keeping her dead friends apprised of her progress. She speaks to visions of them and homemade effigies she created in their image. The experimentation reminds her of the explosion which killed Milo and Clagger. "No," she begs, "it was a mistake." Unable to work on the experiment without mentally breaking down, she visits the old hideout where she used to train with her sister. Elsewhere, Vi brings Caitlin to the Undercity. The enforcer has a hard time keeping up, but manages. Meanwhile, Mel warns Jayce that he's in trouble. As a counselor, he tightens security at the hex gates. As a result, people who use them for smuggling and other corrupt activities will seek his favor. The wealthy and powerful will demand he make exceptions for them in exchange for their support. Jayce is frustrated. He didn't want to get involved in politics. Mel pushed it on him, but she insists it's something he has to do. Moments later, one of those wealthy and powerful people arrives, Amara. Mel promises her that Jayce will reinstate Hexgate privileges for those who invest in his Hextech research, and Amara agrees to the deal. Jayce quickly embraces Mel's political game, making similar deals with others. Mel smiles at her work, manipulating events and Jayce to ensure the advancement of Hextech and the riches that come with it. Marcus visits Silco, worried that Jayce will root out his corruption, but Silco reassures him with evidence that he can use to pin the attack on the Firelights. After Marcus leaves, Silco tells Jinx that she needs to figure out how to work the Hextech gems soon, but she admits it's too difficult. The experiments keep reminding her of the friends she killed. After a long night of politics, Jayce thanks Mel for her teaching him, and she kisses him. As they embrace, Viktor continues to work, toiling away at the Hextech. A woman visits him and asks if he'd like to walk home with her, but he's going to sleep in the lab again. She reminds him there's always tomorrow, and he simply responds, "Good night, Miss Young." She leaves, and he suffers another coughing fit, spilling blood on the table. As he passes out, the Hex Core absorbs his blood. While he lies on the cold laboratory floor, elsewhere, Jayce and Mel consummate their relationship. Silco brings Jinx to the place where he was nearly drowned. He tells her that betrayal can break you, or forge you into something greater. She needs to let Powder die and become Jinx instead, the same way he was reborn in these waters. Underground, Vi takes Caitlin to a brothel. She tells the enforcer to pretend she works there. Hesitant at first, Caitlin soon embraces the role with one of their female patrons. Meanwhile, the owner, a friend of Vi's, tells Vi where she can find Silco's second-in-command, and Vi heads to the Last Drop, the bar Vander used to run. There, she spots Sevika and fills with rage, staring at the woman who betrayed her father. Meanwhile, Viktor wakes at the hospital to find Jayce waiting for him. Jayce spoke to the doctors and knows that Viktor is terminally ill, with little time left. At the Last Drop, Vi attacks Sevika, though Sevika proves to be a formidable foe, especially with the shimmer-enhanced mechanical arm replacing the one she lost in Powder's explosion. Vi pins her down and demands, "Where's my sister? Where is he keeping her?" "Keeping her?" Sevika asks. "You mean Jinx? She works for him." Vi is rattled by the revelation, and Sevika uses the opportunity to stab her, then adds, "She's like his daughter." Before Sevika can finish her off, Caitlin shoots her in the arm, and Sevika runs away. Vi compliments Caitlin's shooting and calls her Cupcake. "Stop calling me that," she says as she helps Vi up. "My name is Caitlin." "But you're so sweet, like a cupcake," Vi says, and they stumble off. In Silco's office, the wounded Sevika returns and lets Silco know that Jinx's sister Vi is back. Years earlier, a young Viktor plays alone with his mechanical boat, away from the other children. He follows the boat into a cove where he spots a large purple creature and a man. The man introduces the creature as a mutation that he's cultivated. "She's dying," he says. "I'm attempting to prevent that." Viktor offers to help. "Very well," the man says. "We can be loners together." In the present, a dying Viktor solemnly continues his work on the Hex Core and realizes it absorbed his blood, which gives him an idea. He shows Jayce his discovery that the Hex Core responds to organic matter, but the plant which flourishes from it quickly dies. It fails like this every time, and with it, Viktor's hope for a cure slowly fades. But Jayce assures him that they will solve it. They bring in Heimerdinger to ask for help, but the professor is horrified by what he sees. The Hex Core, Hextech with the power to evolve and interact with organic matter. Heimerdinger thinks of the past. "You must destroy it," he says. He's seen entire nations destroyed by a single seed, and that seed looked like this. Elsewhere, Jayce discovers many of Silco's guards have left to search for a girl. When Sevika returns, Jayce restrains her and questions the woman. Sevika quickly comes clean over who they're looking for. "It's your sister," she says. "She's back. She's looking for you." At home, a stressed Marcus finds Silco with his daughter. In a thinly veiled threat, Silco tells Marcus that he needs to get control of Vi and the enforcer she's with. Marcus defends himself, saying that Caitlin doesn't toe the line like the other enforcers, but Marcus promises to take care of it. Deep underground, Vi brings Caitlin somewhere they can find help for her wound, a place where impoverished undersiders and those who have transmutated themselves with Shimmer hide in the darkness. There, Caitlin finds a woman who makes potions with Shimmer, and trades her gun for something to help Vi. Marcus visits Jayce and shows him a bomb supposedly implicating the Firelights, the bomb which Silco gave him. Jayce orders Marcus to search everyone who crosses the bridges to protect against further attacks. Then, at the council meeting, Jayce calls Heimerdinger out for his inaction. The Undercity runs rampant with Shimmer, Piltover is under attack, and Heimerdinger only warns them what not to do, but offers no real solutions. "I believe it's time we gave the beloved founder of our city a well-deserved retirement," Jayce announces, and the council agrees. Heimerdinger is removed from the council. Vi wakes up healed. Caitlin notices Vi's name on the wall and realizes this is her old home. She also notices the name Powder and asks about it. "My sister," Vi answers. "I thought she died, but no." "How do you not know if your sister is alive or dead?" Caitlin asks. "It's hard to check up on people from inside a concrete cell," Vi answers. "What, you don't have parents?" Caitlin asks. "No," Vi answers. "They were killed by enforcers." Outside, they find Silco waiting for them. He found their location easily, bribing the locals with Shimmer. Working together, Caitlin and Vi elude his capture. Meanwhile, Jayce holds the flare Vi gave her years earlier. "Wherever you are, light it up, and I'll find you," Vi said, and the younger sister lights it as the vision of her dead friends stand behind her. In the distance, Vi sees the light, and at the bridge to Piltover, under Jayce's orders, the enforcers stand guard. Years earlier, Viktor visits the man he agreed to help. He's disturbed by what he sees. The creature, connected to wires, suffering and mutated, but alive. The man sees Viktor's horror and says, "I thought you understood. The mutation must survive." Viktor runs. In the present, Viktor visits him again and finds the creature still alive, but further dependent on machines as it floats in a vat, powered by Shimmer. "I understand now," Viktor tells the man. Back at his headquarters, Silco finds Sevika hanging from his ceiling. Jayce has graffitied her body with the word liar, accusing Silco of keeping from her that her sister was alive. Elsewhere, Vi follows the light and finds her sister. They tearfully embrace, but when Caitlin arrives, Jayce is spooked by the enforcer. She pulls her gun, and Vi tries telling her that Caitlin can be trusted, but Jayce snaps and ignores her sister, instead arguing with the voices in her head. Then the Firelights arrive. Jayce fights them off, and while she's distracted, Caitlin snatches her gemstone, which fell. Vi is knocked unconscious in the battle, and one of the gang prepares to kill her until their leader orders them to take her instead. They disappear, leaving Powder alone, once again abandoned by her sister. The Firelights take Vi and Caitlin captive. Then they take Vi to another room, and one of the Firelights removes his mask. Vi recognizes him as Echo, the boy who used to work in Benzo's shop, now grown. He demands to know if she's working for Silco. She's disgusted at the accusation. They argue, but she soon reveals their restraints can't hold her. She surprises Echo by embracing him, and he tearfully hugs her back. Elsewhere, Viktor tells his old friend about his problem with the Hex Core, how every subject withers and rots. The man has an idea. Perhaps the issue is that it is not in our nature to change. Fortunately, he points out, we have the capacity to change our nature. He holds up a vial of shimmer. It should provide everything one needs to survive a violent transition, he explains. Elsewhere, Mel finds Jayce venting his frustrations. He hates himself for betraying Heimerdinger, he wants to save Viktor, and he has no idea where Caitlin is, or Viktor for that matter. At the Firelight's home, Echo shows Vi around. He explains how after Vander died, Silco flooded the lanes with shimmer. Everyone here was either an addict or a victim, so they built a new home. At Piltover, there is chaos thanks to the increased guard at the bridges, and it is a bane to the Undercity's dealings. The various Undercity leaders meet and accuse Silco of inaction. What is he going to do about this? Silco answers by unleashing polluted air into the room, a taste of what they used to breathe underground, before Silco gave them a taste of topside. He gives each a gas mask, but Finn tries to hold out, until he ends up on the ground, gasping for air. When he returns to his office, Jinx pays him a visit and demands to know why Silco kept from her that Vi was back. He claims he did it to protect her. At the Firelight's home, Echo frees Caitlin, but they quickly argue about the Enforcers. She defends them, saying the conflict between the Enforcers and the Firelights is a misunderstanding. The Enforcers think the Firelights work for Silco. Echo explains that it's the Enforcers who work for Silco. During the argument, Echo shows the gemstone. "You have to let me take that back," Caitlin exclaims. "What is it?" Vi asks. "It's a gemstone," Caitlin explains. "It was stolen during the attack by your sister," and adds that with it, someone could build powerful hex-tech weapons. Caitlin begs Echo to let her help. If it's true the Enforcers are corrupt, they can bring the gemstone to her friend on the council, Jayce, and get his help. After some convincing, he agrees. Meanwhile, Jayce and Viktor speak with Mel. They look over the weapon Marcus turned in. Mel insists Piltover needs to build hex-tech weapons as a proactive countermeasure, in case the Undercity figures out how to harness the gemstones. Viktor is adamantly against it, but Jayce is unsure. Later, Viktor injects himself with shimmer, and begins the process with his hex core. At the bridge to Piltover, Vi, Caitlin, and Echo run into Marcus and his men. Caitlin tells him they have evidence of Silco's corruption. To ensure it doesn't get out, Marcus shoots Echo, then turns to shoot Caitlin. But Jinx, watching from a distance, sets off explosives disguised as small bugs. Echo survives the gunshot thanks to a bulletproof vest. Caitlin is hurt but okay. Marcus, however, is killed by the explosion. Vi helps Caitlin up, and the sight of them together drives Jinx mad. She fires at them, but Echo attacks her, letting Vi and Caitlin leave with the gemstone. Echo nearly defeats her, until he looks at her face and remembers the girl he was friends with as a child. As he hesitates, Powder releases a bomb, and it explodes. Years earlier, Mel is tested by her mother for her future potential as a leader. A young woman is brought before her, a representative from a regime they've just overthrown. "What should we do with her?" Mel's mother asks. "She won't make trouble for us. Strip her of her possessions and send her to the far colonies," Mel answers, offering that they should show mercy and let her live. Her mother disagrees. As a symbol of the prior regime, she must be killed. Otherwise, they may be forced to kill thousands in the future, and she beheads the woman in front of her daughter. In the present, Mel wakes from her dream of the past. On the bridge, Silco finds an unconscious Jinx with the gem in her hand. Caitlin and Vi check the container, which they thought contained the gemstone, and see that it's empty. Later, Jayce and Mel stand on the bridge, taking in the sight of the carnage. Mel is angry, and Jayce is rattled, vomiting when he takes in the sight of Marcus and the other corpses. Meanwhile, Caitlin brings Vi to her home. There, Caitlin tells her parents about the corruption she's discovered, and at her pleading, her mother agrees to arrange an audience with the council. Elsewhere, Silco brings Jinx to the same man Viktor visited in the underground. With her severe injuries, the man's practice with shimmer is her only hope for survival. At the last drop, Finn sits down with Sevica. He tells her the Undercity is devolving into chaos, and Silco is too distracted by his affinity for Jinx. He lets her know that she isn't the only one questioning Silco's judgment. In Piltover, Mel's mother arrives, 10 years after banishing her daughter from their home of Noxus for being too soft in the ways of war. Her mother shares some news. Mel's brother was killed by someone he wronged, and war is coming to Piltover because things are festering in the Undercity. She's here to guide Mel, and advises that they need to use Jayce Talus's hex tech to develop weapons. At Caitlyn's home, she tells Vi the news, that they'll present their case to the council this evening. Then Vi tells her about Powder, and her guilt at abandoning her. Caitlyn comforts Vi. Underground, Powder undergoes her torturous, life-saving procedure. Meanwhile, Heimerdinger wanders the streets to see the turmoil in their city, and he finds Echo, alive but hurt. Jayce meets with Miss Medarda, Mel's mother. She advises that unless he takes the threat from the Undercity seriously, by developing hextech weapons, he's likely to end up dead. Rattled, he speaks up at the next council meeting, insisting they need to act. Then Caitlyn and Vi arrive to make their case. Caitlyn explains that in the Undercity, people are starving, sick, and ravaged by Shimmer. They live in fear of violent crime lords, led by Silco. Jayce asks what Silco wants, and Caitlyn answers that he wants the Undercity to become its own independent nation. Jayce insists they use Hextech to go in and retrieve the gemstone by force, but Mel disagrees, saying they must try diplomacy first. War should be a last resort. Vi is disgusted. Silco cannot be reasoned with. "He hates you," she exclaims. "Everything you stand for. He will never back down." The council asks for her to be escorted out, but she storms out on her own. Caitlyn chases her outside, and Vi says they tried, but it just doesn't work. Topside and bottom are like oil and water. "What about us?" Caitlyn asks. "Oil and water," Vi replies. Elsewhere, Viktor tests the limits of his hextech and shimmer-enhanced body. He drops his cane, and for the first time, runs. Then he returns to the hex court to continue his work. In the hall, Miss Young nervously walks toward the lab and prepares to show Viktor some work she's been eager to share with him. But when she enters the room, she finds Viktor being pulled into the core. She tries to help him, and Viktor watches Miss Young, the woman who adores him, vaporize. After the reaction fades, he calls out her name, Sky, and the girl he knew since he was a child is gone, leaving only ashes behind. The core pulses. Meanwhile, Vi visits Jayce and insists they do something about Silco without the council's involvement. Silco's operation depends on Shimmer, so they should shut down his supply by attacking the manufacturing facilities. Jayce agrees. With the help of some enforcers, they attack. There are many casualties on both sides, but with the help of Hextech, Jayce and Vi are victorious. However, the victory is joyless when Jayce sees who he's killed, a young boy, apparently in Silco's employ. Then he looks up to see an army of child laborers, held at gunpoint by his enforcers. At her home, Caitlyn steps out of her shower and finds a familiar drawing, left by Jinx. At the Shimmer plant, Jayce turns to go home. He can't be a part of this. Vi insists he's always been part of it, part of the system that causes it. This is just the first time he's had to see one of the dead kids himself. He leaves, and she stays to continue the fight alone. Later, Sevica and the other underground leaders are enraged by the massacre at the plant, and frustrated with Silco for turning a blind eye to Jinx, who caused this by provoking Piltover. Especially upset is Rennie, whose son was killed in the slaughter. And in Piltover, Mel confronts her mother over pushing Jayce to his violent actions, and demands that her mother leave. Then her mother confesses something. The man who killed Mel's brother doesn't believe the score settled, and his resources exceed theirs. If there is a chance Hextech can be weaponized, she says, we must have it. She came to Piltover so she could accelerate war with the Undercity, and force the City of Progress to create Hextech weaponry. Let the war unfold, she tells her daughter, and you come home, take your place at my side. It's where you belong. Elsewhere, Viktor tries to destroy the hex core, but can't bring himself to do it. Then it pulses and sparks, knocking him unconscious. Later, he pours Sky's ashes out of a water outlet, then steps onto the ledge and prepares to jump off it. "Am I interrupting?" Jayce asks. They talk, and Viktor asks Jayce to destroy the hex core since he can't bring himself to do it, and adds, "In the pursuit of great, we failed to do good. We have to make it right." In the Undercity, Sevika, Finn, and Rennie pay Silco a visit. Finn believes they've come to kill the man, but he doesn't realize Sevika is still loyal to Silco, and she kills Finn instead. "I would have had your son killed for this," Silco tells Rennie, "though I suppose we're ahead on that account." Then tells her to get out, and she leaves. Then Silco looks down at a note from Jayce Tallis, requesting a meeting. At the meeting, Silco hands over his list of demands, including sovereignty for the Undercity, or the nation of Zaun, as Silco calls it. Jayce agrees, but in exchange, Silco will need to turn in Jinx to pay for her crimes. After the meeting, Silco visits a statue of his old friend Vander, and solemnly tells him about the trade he's been forced to consider, his daughter Jinx, for the nation of Zaun. Behind the statue, Jinx eavesdrops and grows enraged at this latest betrayal. Elsewhere, with Heimerdinger's help, Echo returns home to the firelights. Meanwhile, Vi returns to her father's old bar to face Sevika again, this time armed with Jayce's Hextech gloves, like the ironclad ones her father used to wear. She's nearly beaten, until a vision of her father reminds Vi that Powder still needs her, so she gets back up and fights until Sevika is beaten. "Bravo, sis," Jinx says, then knocks Vi unconscious. At a council meeting, Jayce tells the other leaders that they are not fit to govern the Undercity. There's no trust left between them, and it's time to grant sovereignty. In exchange, they'll finally have peace with Silco. The council is enraged at the proposal. Vi wakes up underground, tied to a chair and listening to a ranting Jinx, mutated by Shimmer. Vi apologizes for abandoning her, but that isn't enough. The blue-haired girl brings Vi to a dinner table, where she's joined by Silco, Caitlyn, and the effigies of Milo and Clagger. She hands Vi a gun and points to two empty chairs, one marked Powder and the other Jinx. Which chair she takes will depend on Vi's choice. All she has to do is kill Caitlyn to prove her loyalty, and Powder will return. Vi refuses, and begs that they can just leave and put all this behind them. But Silco assures her Vi is lying. She'll abandon her the moment she realizes Powder is gone, and all that remains is Jinx. Silco promises that he will never abandon her though. She is his daughter. He will refuse the Topsider's offer. Even for the nation of Zaun, he would never forsake her. Caitlyn frees herself and points a gun at Vi's sister. Vi begs her not to shoot. Jinx puts her gun down and does her best Powder impression, causing Caitlyn to hesitate. Then Shimmer appears in Jinx's eyes, and she attacks Caitlyn, stopping short of killing her. Vi and Silco beg for Powder or Jinx to listen, and she disappears into delusion, arguing with her inner demons. Then she makes her choice. She fires her machine gun, and it's Silco she's killed. With his dying breath, Silco promises he never would have given her up. "Not for anything," he says. "Don't cry. You're perfect." She sits in the chair marked Jinx, then picks up the gemstone and uses it to power her weapon. She points it at a building in the distance and fires. At the council meeting, Mel Medarda votes in favor of Jayce Tallis' proposal for peace, and the others join her, passing it unanimously. While outside, Jinx's Hextech missile hurtles toward them. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to hear my thoughts on Arcane, check out the episode we did on the One Take podcast. Just click the card in the upper right corner. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next One Take.